G'day and welcome back to another episode of Science Radio. My name is Jesse and I am joined, as always, by my wonderful co-host, Zanita. Hello, Zanita.
Hello.
Today we are in the flesh.
The flesh.
Which is not something that happens very often, so we have to savor these moments. Are you savoring?
I'm savoring. It's really nice not to be, we're in a closed off room. Usually when I record at home, I'm like, is that the mailman? The lawnmower's going? Like, there's all these things happening that
You used to have the airplanes flying overhead. That was quite a feature.
Yeah, and we had the airplane pause every 10 seconds, every few minutes.
But I'm also excited because not only are you in the flesh with me here in this space today, but we have our resident editor-in-chief, Viking-in-chief, Jarrod Stack. Hey, Jarrod.
Here I am.
Here you are. I've been listening to podcasts about Vikings, so I've got Vikings on the brain a little bit.
Do you actually have Viking heritage?
I don't know.
I do.
Maybe.
You used to have this voluptuous long hair, you know, the beard. It made you seem like, I mean, the Viking theme was going for you for a while.
Yeah. My wife was into Vikings, so she's got to keep the wife happy.
Yeah, for sure. You're selfless. That's what you are.
I try.
Yeah.
I try.
So we're here today to talk about an article that you wrote for us, Jarrod. This is something you've been talking about for a little while. We're going to move from the northern climes of Norway and Scandinavia to a place that is probably no less harsh and no less challenging. You, a number of years ago, went on a journey, I was going to say pilgrimage, but it's almost a pilgrimage in a way of your own.
Yes.
A number of years ago. And this is in the beautiful country of Papua New Guinea, the Kokoda Trail. Now, for those listeners maybe outside of the South Pacific who aren't super familiar with what Kokoda is, do you want to just sort of give us the cliff notes? What is the Kokoda Trail? Place us in the space. Why is it significant?
So for many Australians, it sort of is a pilgrimage in some senses. During World War II, the Australian Army had some sort of, there were sort of reserve troops up there, and Japan was coming down through the Pacific. They were taking a lot of different places and a lot of different countries, and their goal was Port Moresby, which is the capital of Papua New Guinea. Port Moresby is relatively close to Australia in flying terms. Papua New Guinea is actually only 4 kilometres from Australia, like the closest land mass of Papua New Guinea and the closest land mass of Australia. So the Japanese were fighting down through the jungles of Papua New Guinea. They'd kind of taken a foothold on the north coast and they were crossing the country to get to Moresby. And the reality was that from Moresby, they could actually launch airplane attacks and have a port and have a base where they could actually attack Australia. So this was very crucial for the Allied forces to sort of keep them back. And Kokoda is actually a village. It's the name of a little village in sort of the middle of the tail of Papua New Guinea, sort of across that spine. And Kokoda is about 96 kilometres from Owa's Corner, which is where the trail starts, the Kokoda Track, which is just outside of Port Moresby. So basically, the Japanese pushed the Australians back. The Australians then pushed the Japanese back. There was heavy and back and forth they went for some time. There was heavy fighting along that trail. And for Australia, it's significant because I guess they held the track. They didn't allow the Japanese to take Moresby. For the Papua New Guineans also, it's a significant place because they actually played a big part in helping the Australian troops to carry out the wounded. And until you go there and experience it, some years before I did the walk, I knew how strenuous it might potentially be because a friend of mine took me to the start of the track, and you get to this point where there's an archway with the Australian sort of coat of arms, and it says, Kokoda Track, and it goes, and you go to the start of this mud path, and it just drops down the hill. Like And when you're going to walk it, your heart drops a little bit, thinking how steeply it descends into the jungle. It basically, it's almost the concave. You almost don't see the bottom of the track because it's so steep. And basically through that little track winds through 90, 100 kilometers of steep jungle, uphill, downhill, uphill, downhill, uphill, and the hills are very steep. So it's a pretty special place for a lot of Australians. They go and do the trail as part of almost like a national remembering. It's
something that happens quite a lot around Anzac Day, if I'm not mistaken. It's almost like a religious experience for a lot of Aussies.
They have a service up. There's a place called Ishirava where there's on the trail where there's actually a memorial, and they have the PNG and the Australian flags flying there. They have some pillars, which say things like honor, respect, mateship, on them. And you sort of, when you're standing there, we did a dawn service there with the porters, and we sang the Australian national anthem. They sang the Papua New Guinean national anthem, and sort of as the fog sort of clears in the morning, you're looking down the valley towards sort of Kokoda and, the plains out beyond that. And you can sort of see through the war memorial, this flat sort of space with these plaques, and then down in through this really narrow sort of valley down into where the country really opens up beyond that. And that's towards the Kokoda end of the track. So we did it from Moresby to Kokoda, and that was sort of one of the last days we woke up in the morning and did that dawn service. And it was really moving. It's a really moving sort of place to think of, the odds, the terrible conditions, the, knee-high mud in some places. The thing that I think actually hurt the Japanese was their supply lines were too thin. And so the deeper they got towards Moresby, the harder it was for them to be refueled and replenished. And it just was a very intense battle during World War II.
Was the hike also, in your experience, was it also intense? Because I know a lot of people, they do it and it's like one of those iconic experiences, and obviously because it also has great importance, and they do things like these ceremonies. But how did you actually go on the hike? Like, is it something that you had to train for, and were you having to really use your mental game and mental mindset to continue doing it?
Yeah, look, in the lead up to the hike, I was training very intensively, sort of went vegan for 6 months, lost about 20 kilos. I was like, if I don't train for this, prepare for this properly, I'm going to die. And that's kind of a joke, but kind of there's some seriousness in there. Like I was like, oh, I really need to do this. At the same time, my wife and I were really trying to fall pregnant. There was a lot of, she had some health issues. And so together we were trying to lose weight and just get healthier, get fitter. And if you see the photos in the magazine, the March issue, you can see I'm half the man I used to be. I'm a bit skinnier. I lost the beard. I actually shaved the beard off as part of the fundraising efforts. So our trip wasn't just military history, an interesting place to go. We actually took some through a partnership with 10,000 Toes. We took some health testing kits to check for diabetes. One thing about Papua New Guinea, it's quite remote, but still they're getting some of the Western lifestyle diseases creeping into that country and all through the Pacific now because of the, 2-minute noodles and all the processed foods. I was up in the highlands of Papua New Guinea on one trip, and those tiny planes that come to refuel, you can't get supplies except they come by air. And I think I counted 90 boxes of Maggi 2-minute noodles coming off the back of this plane. And that was to feed people there. And they love the convenience. It's convenient. But as we know, it's not that nutritious. It's not that helpful for your body. So, yeah, we went up there with 10,000 Toes with the church, some of the leaders of the Seventh-day Adventist Church in the South Pacific. It was partly the health ministry, partly it was just to raise awareness. And actually, fun fact, like Biziatabu is the original mission station for the Seventh-day Adventists in Papua New Guinea, and it's just near where the track starts.
Oh, wow.
And basically, all the denominations, the Christian denominations had arrived in Papua New Guinea before the Adventists did. And they were having some success, but it was also fairly slow. But basically they gave the Adventists the part that was left. They said, you go over there.
The part that nobody else want.
The Koiari people that lived along that track, basically that was their main highway. They were quite warlike and quite difficult, and no one else wanted that area. So the Adventists got that area, and actually by the time of the war, many of those villages had become Seventh-day Adventist villages.
Of course.
So we met some beautiful people. They walked for a couple of days into the evenings to feed us in the evenings when we would arrive at a certain camp or a certain village. Some of them had come from the surrounding hills and villages and walked for, all day basically to feed us. And then the next morning off they went back again, back to their home places. We spent a really nice combined Sabbath at Kagi village where a bunch of, I think 5 big churches from other areas had all come together for a bit of a regional program. So it was a really special walk. And there were a lot of good reasons for me to be there. I was like, wow, this trip can hold a lot of meaning for me. So yes, it was intimidating. And I will say, you asked about the mental game of it. Like physically I was in shape, I was ready. I don't think mentally I was prepared for what unfolded on the track. It was a lot harder mentally than I anticipated it being.
Well, let's go to that, because obviously, in hindsight, this trip has a lot of you have a lot of fond memories of, but you write in the article about some of the tougher moments mentally, specifically. And you weren't coming alone. There were church leaders around, but there was also a family connection. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, in the preparation, initially I asked my mum if she'd be interested. My mum's quite fit at the time. She's, into her 60s, but very still running, still walking, very active. And she was like quite interested. I think I asked my sister initially because she had shared with me at one point that it would be something she'd like to do in her life, the Kokoda.
Bit of a bucket list item.
Yeah, but she was just not going to be available. It was just not good timing and things weren't going to work. And then mum came, and then my brother got wind of it, so he wanted to come along too. And for me, I guess I've lived out of home since I was like 19, technically 21, because when I'd finished college, like when I was at college, I was still based at home. I was still coming back during the school holidays and that sort of thing. But once I graduated, 21, moved to Victoria, and I was far away from my parents. So I'd see them once or twice a year, at best, for the next 10, 15 years. And so this was a chance to do something with my family, to spend time with mum, to spend time with my brother, and just to achieve something together, bonding. You're excited to go anyway, but to go with people that you love, that you care about, that was going to be next level for me. I was really looking forward to that. And I think part of that was really building up expectations in my mind of what that could, this is going to be a magical bonding experience. It's going to bring us really close together, and we've got that opportunity to hang out.
I think it's a good picture of life because you talk about having these expectations. And I think back to when myself, and probably you guys did this as well, when you're in school, you look forward at your life and you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to get married at 25. I'm going to go to uni and get a job and, have that. Then we're going to get married. We're going to have kids. We're going to travel. We're going to do this. And you have this like timeline of your life, or you have this picture and expectation of your life. But very rarely does that just go to plan, or very rarely do you just tick the boxes in that order as you would have liked or thinked. And I think for a lot of people that brings up heaps of anxiety because you're like, things aren't going to plan. And, you see other people, I guess you compare yourself to the best of the best and the people who it is working out for. And you're like, how come this didn't work out for me? Or how come this trip didn't go as I hoped? And so I think it's a really relatable situation because it's what we all experience, or a lot of us experience.
I've truly come to believe in this experience, but also other things, comparison and unmet expectations can really be a thief of your joy. It can just take away your passion and your excitement of life because you're so busy living in the future. And that's part of anxiety as well. So busy living in the future, you're not actually present. That can be a challenge.
So the trip started off pretty well.
Beautiful. We stayed at Pacific Adventist University on the weekend. My mum, my brother, and I praise God for this because this is, looking back, a very helpful, positive memory to have. We came in early. Some of the other people came in sort of on the Sunday or something straight away, ready to go. But we came in on, I think, the Thursday night or the Friday. We stayed at Pacific Adventist University. So I had a connection with a charity there called Operation Food for Life, now called Operation Life. So I took my mum and my brother to an orphanage on Saturday afternoon. We met the kids and did sort of worship with them there. I think my family really enjoyed that time. That was really nice to see, I guess, just such a different life experience. Many of the kids there, they may not even be fully orphans, but they've been abandoned by their family in some way. Some of them have disabilities, and that was a really precious experience. We spent time at the church there on the campus. And then on, I think it was the Sunday, they took us to the Bomana War Cemetery. Now, part of the personal reason as well to do this is my great uncle, my grandfather's brother, actually died at Bougainville in Papua New Guinea. And they've got a memorial plaque there in the war cemetery at Port Moresby. We came in as a group quite late in the day. We were stressed about finding this grave or this memorial. I'm not sure if all the people are actually buried there or they're just like remembered there in some way, but we wanted to find that. My mum was very keen. I don't know that she had ever met him because he died in the war before she was born. But her parents have also passed. So it was like a very special thing to try and find this memorial for us. And when we got there, it was pouring with rain. We were later than we anticipated being, which meant that they were like, we're shutting, like you got to hurry. And many of the group went around with our tour guide. He's done a lot of these Kokoda tours, and he was giving them some history, some of the graves, some of this and that. Mum and I broke away from the group, and we were like, we got to find, Uncle Victor, we got to find this because we really want to. And I found a little shed down the back, and we were flipping through. We said some prayers too, I can tell you, because it was like, we're running out of time. This is a really, strenuous situation. It's pouring with rain. We've got to find this. Found a little folder with like laminated dodgy paper that was sort of like deteriorating a bit, but it had lists, like alphabetical lists and references to the grave. It was set out like an old street directory or something. So kids of today, there was no GPS. They wouldn't have been able to find anything in this cemetery. But I found this paper and we flicked through, found the row, and we actually took some photos at the grave, the memorial site there. So that was all really positive stuff. I mentioned the rain though. We were to start walking. We were to wake up at like 3:30, 4 o'clock start, get on the bus, and it was raining.
So it's going to be a recurring theme.
It was raining and it was raining and we were driving up. We stopped, had to poke our heads out the bus windows at Biziatabu, the mission station that I mentioned where the church had started there. And then we were not far from Kokoda. I think we got bogged maybe twice in the bus.
Only twice?
On the way. So this was the start of the troubles. This was the bogging and stuff. It's fun. It's part of the adventure, It is what it is. But the rain, yes, will play a further part in that morning's adventures.
I feel like sometimes when you travel, though, these things that are annoying and frustrating on the trip are the standout memories that you have for years. Like I know some of my favorite travel memories are when things have gone terribly wrong, and the people who I've traveled with in the past are like, that was your favorite memory, but it's just like it becomes funny. It becomes like memorable.
Yeah.
I've heard you talk about some of your travel memories. I think I can only remember the times that have gone really wrong for you.
They make for good stories.
They do. So first day, you set off. It's raining. It's pouring. old man is snoring, and you're getting along. You kind of, it's my understanding that the group kind of separates out a little bit. Different people go at their own pace, and then you get to camp at the end of the day,
Yeah.
and
So
you're greeted by.
a a, a devastating. uh,
How are you feeling up until this point? You're getting to the end of the day.
fantastic.
So you've had a great first
Yeah,
day. You
yeah,
feel like you've
yeah.
accomplished, and then
So I was a little bit frustrated in the morning because it's like, let's get going.
Yeah.
My family were taking their time, having breakfast, taking photos, and I was like, we don't want to be left at the back. Like we got to go. I don't know. I think I've got some German DNA in there that's like efficiency, on time, punctual. Let's go. So I'm like, let's go, guys. And we're taking photos. I think there's a photo in the magazine of us taking a selfie
There is.
at the start. Like we're ready to go. But some people have ducked off. They're down the hill.
Yeah.
And down that first hill, it's very wet. And basically the ground is like clay. It's mud. It's slippery, but it's clay-ish, and there's sort of steps worked into the side of this hill and going straight down. And we all had different porters and stuff that helped us. And my porter, he was a very experienced guy, and I was a bigger guy, so they were like, "Yeah, get that guy to help him," because he, And I'm slipping around all over the place. So basically, that first morning, we're relearning how to walk. I literally explained like, when you put your foot somewhere, your foot doesn't stay there. It's very unnerving going down a steep hill where you can't actually, you feel like you're going to maybe tip over at any point. You're walking with a pack. I had bought some poles. Everyone's like, oh, you need those hiking poles, but they were like retractable ones for travel. So they would get stuck in the mud, and then they would unhook themselves, and they were just absolutely useless.
I'm picturing that scene in Bambi where Bambi is a baby and she first tries to start walking like a baby deer.
Yeah. It's relearning how to walk. And old mate, Elijah, I think was my porter's name. Elijah's tapping with his stick, taps here. So I put my foot there. My foot doesn't slip.
Wow.
And he taps here. And I'm like, but I saw a spot that was good. So I go not quite where he tapped. I slip a little bit. So then I'm like, this guy knows what's up. Like he's tapping.
Yeah.
I slipped a couple of times. He grabbed the hook on the back of my pack and just held me up. Now these guys are phenomenal. They're in thongs.
What?
Jandals, flip-flops.
Crazy.
Some of them are in barefoot doing these hikes. And we're all in the Merrells or the hiking boots,
I'm imagining it's very humid, very hot, and
it wasn't. I don't remember the heat, honestly.
Okay.
That first morning, it was drizzling, it was whatever, but it didn't
Thongs.
feel sort of hot.
Okay.
Some of them are, in
That's
flip-flops.
the worst thing to wear. You'd think.
You'd think.
They take it
Obviously
off and
not.
hook it on their back.
Oh,
Just go
yeah.
barefoot, But often they're wearing thongs. And
Okay.
the day was good. We got to a lunch break. I was like, this isn't too bad. Looked around for my brother, couldn't find him, but spent some time with mum. That afternoon, there was an hour or two, we were walking up a creek, like a riverbed. Really, it was pretty golden light, like the rain had stopped. And I spent some time with mum. Her porter, also quite an old guy, one of the oldest guys in the group. Struggling a little bit, but my porter was helping her and helping me, and we were making it work. And I spent, I really thought that was a good afternoon's work, But, she was like, yeah, go ahead, you're fine and whatever. And I was walking and I found myself towards the end of the day, I was walking quite alone. It was easier than it had been at the start. And I was just sort of reflecting like, this has been a nice day, this is great. And as I enter, there's sort of like a crest, and I'm coming in on this little dirt track. There's some grass huts ahead of me. Some people have just dropped their packs and are just lying around. Everyone's like, and I see my brother coming up the path towards me. And I went, we've done it. We made it, like day one, we've done this. And I was elated. Like I was feeling excited, energetic, happy. And as he got, a meter or so from me, he goes, probably won't quote his exact words, but he said something like, I've stuffed my shoulder.
Yep.
And my heart just dropped. I was like, what is he talking about? Like, what has happened? And he started crying. And I grabbed him and I started crying. And I'm like, what is happening? And he's like, I can't get my pack off. He's still got his day pack on. So we had the day packs, the light packs, and then we had heavy packs that our porters helped with the tents and all the stuff in it. And he was holding this. And I mean, you can always look back in hindsight. He probably had a bit much in his pack. He had all the gadgets and things for his day, and it was probably quite heavy. But on that first hill down from Owen's Corner, he had slipped and fallen on his arm. And he actually, scans revealed that he'd dislocated his shoulder.
Ouch.
And it had come back in or whatever, but it had torn it a bit, and he was just in a lot of pain. And so I'm like, trying to get him some help. There was a nurse on our trip, so she's looking at him. He's lying there. And then I don't know if it was the exhaustion of the day or the shock of him. He's lying there. She's treating him. I'm feeling lightheaded. So I'm lying next to him on the grass, and we're just like, and my mum wanders in like later on. What's happened now? She's stressing, worried about it. And we were just like, it was like, the uncertainty of it all, like what's going to happen. It's only day one. How are we going to get this done? And it was just a big shock. And he wasn't feeling good. They did a lot of tests, tried his shoulder out, his mobility. He took his bag off. We helped him with his bag off and stuff. And he was just there, but they gave him some strong painkillers, and he just wasn't in a good shape. He wasn't in good shape. Now, again, hindsight, 2020, he probably should have told someone at the time. So they could have taken his bag and carried it for her. They could have helped him.
The rest of that first day.
That first day was 11 hours of walking.
And so the first bit would have been like, what, 2 hours or like that from when he had his injury.
He had his injury. He had his injury about 15 minutes in.
Oh, wow.
And then he hiked the rest
He's a man. We're men, right?
Even
we don't ask for help. We think,
be...
you'll walk it off. You know, we've just started, whatever. Yeah. But you can imagine 11 hours of hiking with his heavy pack. Yeah. And other people would have carried his stuff, but he just didn't ask. He didn't. And men, lesson out there, ask for help when you're in trouble. No judgment. What's past is past. But someone else went home that first day. One of the presidents of the Western Australia conference, he came with his brother. And his brother twisted his knee and went home probably by the end of that hill, the first hill. He decided to go. So 2 or 3 of us got injured on that first hill. It was intense.
Wow. So your brother and your mum, I believe you mentioned the next day decided to go back?
Yeah. So they shared a tent.
Okay.
And she was looking after him overnight, trying to see how he was going to go. The nurses couldn't give us a lot of info. There was no opportunity to get out any other way but to walk. So back the 11 hours of the hill we've just come down. And I went to bed in my own tent. I was sharing that night. After they went home, I got a tent to myself for the rest of the trip, foreshadowing that. But yeah, they made the decision in the morning to go back to Port Moresby to get some scans. The concern was, I mean, mum's a mum, and I was healthy and fit, and he was in trouble. You know, my brother needed her. She was devastated because she'd trained for this. She thought it was her last opportunity to do something like this. She thought, I should do this. But, you know, when that parental instinct kicks in, you just can't fight it. So they had talked. My brother had a 6-month-old baby. You know what that's like, Jesse. Right. Just recent times, he's stressed if he can't work. What's going to happen to his family? Maybe he'll get a scan, get checked out back at home. But he was pushing. He wanted a helicopter ride out of there. He just wanted to get out, and they're like, "Well, that's not going to happen. It's too expensive. It can't work. Yeah. So you're going to have to walk." So
the Kokoda Trail, how long do they estimate most people take to complete it?
It took us 8 days.
8 days.
8 or 9 days.
He's not going to do another 8 days of.
Well, this was the issue. Like, we had other people injure themselves, get sick and whatnot, like halfway through or towards the end. I think if his injury had happened, with a day or two, he would have known. But 15 minutes in, you just
Yeah.
like, I can't
Yeah.
continue for another 8 days like
not
this.
knowing
Like
what
it's
it's gonna
just
be.
not, it's just
Yeah.
too much.
Yeah.
So psychologically, they just couldn't
Yeah.
do it. And we were like, well, if he has to fly back to Australia, that's the recommended, thing that will happen. How's he going to get through customs and everything with a stuffed shoulder? He can't pick up his bags. He can't, So mum made the decision she needs to look after him. So his porter, her porter, and some others took them out, walked them out that day. We walked in one direction, they walked in the other.
Was that a conflicting thing for you? Like, did you at all feel like I should go with them, or were you like,
100%.
I'm doing the hike?
No, I was definitely staying, but I was torn. Mum was saying, you should do it, you should finish it. But also my heart just was ripped up within me because I was one of the highest fundraisers. I was being paid to be there by work. So I had to report on the event. I was going to write up stories. I was going to do all sorts of things that I hoped to do. I was really ripped in two, basically. Do I stay? Do I go? And I felt like if I stay, I'm letting a whole bunch of people down, like work, friends, family, people that have donated. They'll just be so disappointed. And if I continue on, I'm letting my family down. Basically, I'm abandoning them.
Hard choice.
You write about this in the article, how, and it's funny, this is about values, and we talked about values with Simon Matthews recently, about how they are really the things that drive us to become the people that we become. For you, you write about how there's these two very strong values you just mentioned. So work ethic, not letting down the team on the work front, but also not letting the family team down. And these come into conflict with each other.
Yeah.
Quite excruciatingly for you at this point.
I didn't, I'm not sure I mentioned this in the article, but there was a bunch of other stuff that happened after this, emotionally roller coaster, but this really set me on that trajectory. And I actually had counseling at a time after this. And talking to my counselor, she helped me to see that like two of my management systems, my internal management systems that I strongly like hold to is my work ethic and my family values, trying to, put my family first and whatnot. And those two things came into conflict. Like those are good things, and people who are driven by those, we might think, oh, wow, they've made it. They're great. They're good moral people. They're upstanding sort of citizens. But for me, those two things, there was no right answer. If I left, I was betraying one of those values. If I stayed, I was betraying another value. And I really had no internal system to deal with the outcome of that, like what that looked like. So I did have positive experience on that trick, but the next day especially, I was walking in a bit of a daze, like one foot in front of the other. I at times when I was walking alone, just me and my porter, or sometimes when it was easy, they would disappear. They would walk off, at their own pace and sort of like, he'll be right. It's fairly flat,
Yeah.
And you were alone with your thoughts, and I was just like, how do I process this? I talked to God a lot, but I didn't process it very well, and I didn't have any tools or equipment to process it at the time. I still had to survive.
Yeah.
I still had to get to the end uninjured and happy, and and so the rest of the trip was enjoyable. It was good, but it was hard. And once I got home, I started to realize that I had a lot of unprocessed, probably guilt. It's like my life to that point, I had always not chosen my family in some sense. Like, even though I feel like I'm where I need to be for my career and my immediate family, I had let down my family of origin. I'd not let them down. I know they're proud of me and whatever, but I I remember I made a speech at my sister's 21st, and it was like, I've missed half your life because she's 10 years younger than me.
Mm.
It's like, she's an amazing person and all the rest, but it bubbled out during that speech because I realized that, like, and this was before Kokoda and stuff, but just realized that in my life I have some guilt around not being there for my family as best as I could be,
Mm.
which became a really hard thing to process. And so with the stress and some of the other things that happened, my wife and I found out we were pregnant not long after the Kokoda trip, which was a blessing from God, but also a very stressful and strenuous pregnancy.
Mhm.
She had some health issues and whatnot. And so basically it derailed my health journey, my mental journey, and I was in a really dark place, after COVID hit. Um, it became clear that I needed to talk to someone and
Mm.
process some stuff. There was some stuff going on that I needed to get help with.
I think what you're saying is probably really relatable, especially to males, because you're talking about the values of family and working hard, like doing your best with your job. And a lot of the times, males, especially when they've got a family, they're the two things that matter the most. But often they clash because in
Mm,
order to provide
yeah.
for and care for your family and create a really great life for them, it requires that you work hard, and that requires that you're away from them. And I think a lot of people, values are so important, but a lot of people aren't clear about that, and they don't have grace on the conflict that is happening
Mm,
between those two. And I think it really helps when you kind of gain clarity over that and you realize that sometimes, like, that's difficult to figure out how to juggle both, and it's difficult to find a balance, and sometimes that's not going to go as perfectly as you hoped.
yeah. And I hope that this helps, this conversation, some people listening to it, because they may not have my exact experience, but I've found that naming something or
Mm.
understanding something takes some of its power away. It's helpful first step to actually acknowledge that, just to understand or hear someone else describe my own conflict back to me into these categories that made it easy for me to understand. I'm like, actually, there's a lot of truth in what she's saying. Like, that makes sense now. I understand more about how I'm driven, how I'm
Mm.
wired. And that's not wrong to be wired that way, but it is helpful to understand it and to be able to process it. Because, as you said, Zanita, men aren't always good at processing the emotional fallout of some of those things. They just think
Women too.
if I work harder, I can only speak on behalf of
Yeah.
my own gender. But yeah, we don't always talk about it
Mm.
very well, or we don't deal with things, process things very well.
How have you been processing this now in more recent years that you have got your own family now? It's not just about the family of origin, but it's your kids and your wife, and you have this whole new dynamic going on. I'm assuming work hasn't gotten any easier or less stressful for you.
Got a new job since then. Science, science is the part.
Exactly.
It was extra. It's a good question. I think having that counselling at the time helped. I think last year I did through work, which was very good. I did some leadership training, which also gave me better tools for the work side of things to, as fallout from that, plus the next few years of craziness. We had a lot of people leave during COVID, and so we had whole staff turnover. You guys have only been here around 2-3 years, but at that time, basically my whole team left and we had to start again. And that was very like, it loaded me up. I was burning out, which is probably part of the reason I went to talk to someone. The burnout, just added to all the tumults, the tempest of emotions that I was experiencing. And so like the other year when I did the leadership training, it was helpful to give me better tools to be a better leader and to better manage myself, because management starts with managing yourself, being in tune with how you're feeling and why, and then not passing that on to other people or blaming them for, some of that stuff. And so that was helpful, but also, trying to be present. Definitely still work is very important to me, but my family is also very important. And so prioritizing their needs, their, time, my time for them. Cutting down, simple as cutting down screen time on my phone, making sure that the phone is sort of away until the kids are in bed. So playing, reading,
Being present, sort of thing.
we have no screen time during the week. Like, well, my wife and I will watch something after they go to bed, sort of thing. But we won't have TV on during the week. That's sort of a weekend treat. And so, just these are little things we do. Family worship, spending time singing and talking and reading stories to the kids is like really important for us to try and do that as often as we can to really just stay grounded in that family. And process some of that stuff. I was we all have times and seasons in our lives that are quite difficult. One Christian sort of spiritual, what's the word, relationships guru talks about the wall and how you can hit this wall and you can either go through it or you can not. But if you don't, you won't actually grow. You won't mature. You won't. I think it's emotionally mature spirituality was the book. And you don't grow past that wall if you choose not to. And I've been through a few walls in the past few years, but it's also helped my faith in God to, I've had some existential questions and some challenges, but God has personally showed me He has been present with me even in those difficult seasons. So once you get through some of those walls, you actually come out a more empathetic, compassionate person, both to yourself and to others. You learn lessons and they're hard, but you get through it and you can actually be a better person once you've gone through that. And I'm not saying that in the sense that God glorifies, that we should glorify suffering or that God inflicts that suffering on you to make you a better person, or that's a whole nother theological conversation that we could have maybe another day. But I have seen that even in processing some of this type of stuff and other things that have happened to me, I can see God's hand there, His presence working through my life and helping me to get through the other side. Yeah, there's some scars, but He's actually been close and worked on my heart to make me a better person because of some of the challenges that we've sort of overcome.
I want to talk to you about in your article you talk about having an abundance mindset, and I don't know if that's what you're tapping into here, but what do you mean when you say an abundance mindset over an anxiety mindset? Because you have acknowledged that in your trip that you kind of felt anxious on your trip, that afterwards you felt anxious, and that having this abundant mindset helped with that. Can you flesh out a little bit what that actually looks like?
I had to do a presentation at church and the theme for the month was anxiety. And this is where I started tapping into this story just to understand, to relate to people. This is my experience of feeling somewhat anxious. Maybe we didn't mention, but that first night when they were debating in their tent what they were going to do, I was in my own tent having like a panic attack. I think that's what it was. I couldn't, my Fitbit or whatever, I couldn't get my heart rate below like 120.
Ooh.
And I was lying
Lying down
on a mattress, trying to go to sleep,
Trying to rest, but
just doing nothing.
Yeah.
And yet my heart was racing, my breath was shallow. I couldn't And so as part of looking at that, we were looking at the Sermon on the Mount, some of Jesus' teachings in sort of Matthews 5 and 6. And I guess the opposite of an abundance mindset that I talk about in this article is a scarcity mindset. There's not enough to go around. I need to fight and claw my way to the top. If I don't do enough hours at work, I don't get whatever for my family. If I don't, et cetera, et cetera.
I think that's the mindset that most of us kind of naturally have.
I think, unfortunately, it's a default mindset and it's highlighted or heightened by the comparison generation. Instagram, I'm looking at other people, I'm seeing, I think you mentioned this earlier, Zanita, the highlight reels of their life. Like, that's not all the bad bits, the difficult bits, that's the best bits. And then we compare our worst days to our other friends and peers to their best days,
Mm.
right? And it's just not a fair thing. But it's again that scarcity mindset, like they're getting theirs, I need to get mine. They've got
Yeah.
this and this and
I
this.
don't have enough.
Why am I not getting that? Why can't I do this? And it's really you can look at a bunch of Bible stories that display characters with this scarcity mindset, like trying to get theirs. And Jacob, for example, the founder of Israel, the nation, and he was called Israel, he who wrestles with God. But Jacob means like deceiver, liar, and he was always wrestling and fighting for his position, his birthright, what he wanted, what he could get out of it, against God's plan, almost in some senses. But Jesus talks about this. I see it as an abundant mindset. He comes from a way different worldview, a way different idea, and that is God is my provider. He provided everything, He created everything, and He's going to look after things. Don't worry about it. And so His teachings in that passage are like, don't worry about tomorrow. Look at the birds. They get fed, and your master knows about them. God knows about them. So what more would He care for you? Look at the flowers. Not even King Solomon in all of his splendor was, arrayed as those flowers are. And yet, the world runs after clothes, appearance. We're often caught up in our appearance and our outward, or appetites, your food. The birds get fed, And so he picks on this appetite and this appearance as underlying motivational factors for humans and the earthly worldview. And then he says, don't worry about these things. God can provide. God can provide over and above for those things. He's like, much more focus on me, focus on doing good to others, focus on, like, if you take it with the rest of his teachings in the Sermon on the Mount, it's about God will provide when things don't look like they're going right. That's because you've got a human mindset, not a heavenly mindset. And I think so for me, it's not easy.
Yeah.
I'm not saying this is easy to flip your mindset. But that's like, you've heard people talk about the difference between joy and about happiness. Happiness is that sort of scarcity mindset, or that, I'm going to get mine. I'm going to be happy because I'm chasing that. But joy is being content even in the challenges and the trials and the difficulties of life, because God will provide. That's where the joy comes from. So I think, there's a lot. I mean, for my sermon, at least for my presentation, I just scratched the surface in 1,200 words in this article. It's just the tip of the iceberg. But I really see God in the garden, right through to God in Revelation, right through the Bible. God wants to provide for his people. He built them a nice garden. They were to cultivate it and to have enough. They had everything they could want to eat, etc. Right to the end, he's going to restore things into the city, and that's where he wants to spend time with us forever. And that's an amazing promise. And it just shows that he's always on this different wavelength. He's trying to provide and to give us a taste of his glory, his presence. And yet in our human mindsets, often we're looking at, how can I get my own? How can I get more than my neighbor's got?
It's very it's philosophical, and I love that. I love thinking about this sort of stuff. But on a very practical level, I love what Jesus says at the end of Matthew 6, verse 27, talking about the birds. Are you not more valuable than they? Can any of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? I mean, that is so practical, right? It's like, how much time do we spend worrying and being anxious about the future? And how much does it actually help us to do so? Worrying cannot add a single hour to our life. And so what's the alternative? I think that's Jesus. That's Jesus' step in the door, right? If worrying can't, add to our lives, make our lives more abundant, or indeed extend our life in any way, shape, or form, well, what's the way that we can do that? And I think inviting us into this abundance mindset, this kingdom mindset that Jesus talks so much about
Yes.
must be the way.
And it's not a sweet by and by sort
Yeah.
of thing. It's a worldly, earthly, your appetites, your appearance, the things that you care
It's very
about that other
grounded.
people. It's a pragmatic sort of approach. I will just say though that, and we're not saying like mine wasn't necessarily ever clinical anxiety, and there are people that have severe anxiety issues. We're not just saying don't worry,
Mm.
You need your help. You need professional help. You can get treatment for those things.
And
I guess
even though you didn't, get diagnosed, you still got professional help, and that was still part of your
I
journey.
did. And so, I don't want people to get the wrong idea that are listening to this, like minimize this. This is serious stuff, but Jesus' kingdom mindset can help with even that stuff. Right. But especially the everyday run of the mill sort of anxiety that we experience, like in our competition to get ahead, that stuff Jesus has an answer for. The heavy stuff, the really serious stuff, Jesus, I believe, can also help with that, but you've got to be responsible.
Yeah.
We're not saying don't get help, don't seek
Yeah.
professional help. And I just want to make that clear. We need to be responsible in our advice and our talking about these topics. There's serious things that people are struggling with, and we need to acknowledge that.
Can I throw in a curly question?
Go for it.
For either of you? I dealt with a bit of anxiety for a few years as well, and I used to I think there's this like tension between like faith and mental health, where some people are like, just read your Bible more, just trust in these promises more. And I used to feel like when people would say, don't worry, and they would point me to these verses, I would be like, but if I don't worry, I'll get nowhere. Because I think anxiety, I'm not pro anxiety, but I think anxiety in small doses is kind of beneficial. Like it does help us to keep safe and motivate us in ways. And there's a few things, and I think worry is the same. Like we do need to be like wise and thinking about the future and making decisions for tomorrow. Because if we do just think about today, we probably won't achieve our goals, and I don't know, other things will happen. So what is like the balance of at what point does that worry or that anxiety become unhealthy? And how can we kind of be more aware of that? Like for people who aren't picking up on this is an unhealthy kind of anxiety, or this is like I'm not in a good mental place right now.
That's a curly question. I think Jesus challenges us to challenge the status quo. And so it can be very easy to fall into a mindset where worry rules our life, our experience. I think what Jesus is challenging us to do, and especially to take on the abundance mindset, is to take on God's provision. And so to put God as Lord of your life. If you put God in the highest sort of motivating part of your life, the number one seat in the house as such, then you can still worry, but it's in a better context, if that makes sense. I was reading a book called The Anxiety Opportunity, and it's a Christian author. I forget his name off the top of my head, but he does talk about this, how anxiety can be an opportunity. It can make us better. It can be helpful. The birds, like if you take Jesus at face value, like he says, don't worry, the birds don't worry. So, and they get fed. But the birds do go out and look for food. They are active in the process. So God's not saying just sit back and life will come to you. So you're active in the process, but your mindset or your who's in charge in your life, don't let worry or anxiety be in the driver's seat.
Yeah.
Don't let that scarcity mindset control you. To quote Carrie Underwood, Jesus take the wheel,
I think the difference between like Jesus and things like The Secret, or these like new age things, just let the universe manifest whatever it is that you desire, is I think Jesus is much more grounded in our reality than a lot of these self-help gurus. I think Jesus also, particularly in the Sermon on the Mount, he's very deliberately using provocative language. Um, Jesus is a master of hyperbole. He does it constantly throughout his teachings, and he shocks people, angers people, he bewilders people, sometimes his own disciples, right? Over and over and over again. And that doesn't mean that he doesn't mean what he says, but I think it's deeper than just Jesus is just saying exactly how he feels or what he wants to, I think, invite his listeners, and that includes us today, into the kingdom mindset that is so anathema to what we would naturally, like you talking about that default, Jarrod, of there's not enough in the world. I need to get what's mine, even if it means pushing down somebody else or stealing from somebody else. Jesus is saying, actually, no, God has created a world, a universe, in fact, that is big enough for all of us. And the way that we achieve happiness, or I don't even know that Jesus is concerned about us achieving happiness. I don't think he is. But, I guess living the kind of life that God has created us as human beings to live is to embrace his kingdom mindset. I will say, though, when you actually read the Bible and the characters that you see in the Bible, even those ones who embrace this mindset still don't always have a great time of it. I'm thinking of the prophets. The Apostle Paul lives a very, very, he's a violent man who becomes a man of peace, who then suffers violence constantly and abuse constantly, despite being, this incredible church planter, evangelist, writer, church father, all that sort of stuff. So I don't think that this is the ticket to living in a nice little yurt in Fiji and just having being one with the universe. I don't think that's what Jesus wants you to sort of have, that westernized sort of self-determination kind of life.
He does want you to have peace.
He wants you to have peace, and that teaching is actually sort of a triplet of teachings. There's sort of 3 on judgment, and then there's 3 on money, and we often decouple that word. The third one, the worry, don't worry, and we took it very generally, but in context, it's actually talking about money specifically, and money leading your motivation, leading your life. So yes, we've talked in general concepts about having an abundance mindset, etc. But back to your question, like in context, that passage is very much talking about money. And do we allow material things to own and to run our decision-making, factories in our brain? So yeah, it's important to have that, I guess, nuance, or to, the Bible is a wealth of information, but it's not a step-by-step how-to guide. It's nuanced. It's a thing you should read and meditate on, think about, and it will help give you some wisdom.
It's wisdom literature, right?
A lot of it is, and I do believe Jesus' Sermon on the Mount is very much modeled in that sort of type of genre.
And not to go down a rabbit hole, because we do need to wrap this up, but
it's just getting good.
the people that Jesus is talking to are some of the poorest people that probably have ever existed in any society. I mean, the tax rate in the Roman Empire was astronomically high. These are people from a backwater province. They would have been taxed for all they would have been worth. These are poor people. These are not people who are middle class living in North Sydney or the hills or whatever. I think in the day and age we live, with the cost of living crisis being what it is, possibly this is an even more appropriate and relevant, timely kind of discussion to have than we have for a while. But perhaps that is something we can talk about a little bit more in another episode. I don't know.
Sounds good. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you, Jarrod. Thank you, Zanita. This has been great. I really enjoyed it. I hope that you guys have enjoyed it. Thank you, Jarrod, for writing the article, for being so vulnerable, sharing with us. If you'd like to read the article, you can just by going to sciencemag.com, reading all the stuff that Jarrod has put out. and much, much more. You'll find the article is called Anxiety versus Abundance, Cultivating a Better Mindset. You can find it in the March 2025 issue of Science Magazine. And so much more. So thank you, Jarrod. We'll see you guys in the next episode.
Can't wait.
Bye-bye.